Hi, everyone. So thank you for joining us for our first Earth Day event for the day. This one is really exciting. But before we get started on unfolding everything, I'm going to start off with introducing myself. So my name is Joanna Montes, and I am the graduate assistant for the Center for Civic, the Center for Civic Engagement. And to share a little bit about what we do, we organize dozens of events on campus, which include forums, conferences, debates, workshops, exhibitions, cultural gatherings, amongst others. And they all center around several themes, including nonviolence, social justice, sustainability, the democratic process, and globalization. And so much like today's first event of the day titled Indigenous Leaders in the Climate Movement, we encourage you to continue the global conversation outside of these doors on how we can understand these events and how it relates back to our lives. Our moderator for today is going to be our very own Hofstra student and CCE fellow, Alex Attilli. Alex is a current senior majoring in political science with minors in Spanish and Latin American Caribbean studies. Her research interests include constitutional law, immigration policy, and Latin American and Caribbean studies, as well as she is our DiNincenzo Peace Fellow Award winner for the year of 2020 to 2021. And so without sharing too much of today's events, I'm very excited to pass the mic to Alex to share more about our exciting guest speaker and the purpose of today's event.
Hi, my name's Alex. I guess I don't need to introduce myself because Joanna did such a wonderful job. I really wanted to provide a platform for Indigenous voices in the climate movement because I know based on my research that it is these Indigenous voices that tend to drive the climate movement at its core. So I'm very thrilled to introduce our speaker today, Winona LaDuke. She is an American economist, environmentalist, writer, and also an industrial hemp grower, which is kind of ironic because we're in Hempstead, New York. And she is specifically known for her work on tribal land claims, preservation, and sustainable development. I also want to note, because I personally think that this is very interesting, she is a co-founder of Honor the Earth, and in 2016, she became the first Green Party member to secure an electoral vote for vice president. So please welcome our guest.
Hello, Anine, nice to see you all. I'm happy to be here in this virtual way. Cut my carbon footprint and I still get to visit with you, so that's pretty good. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our work, but again, honored to be with you. I just want to say first, Happy New Year. In the Ojibwe community, in our community, this is the new year. Actually, in a lot of the world, the new year starts when the world wakes up, which is when spring comes. You know, and so I just want to say for us, it is Iskigamizige Gizis, which is the maple syruping moon, which I think you guys might have up there too. Is a time when maple sugar is made. And in our, it is when the earth wakes up. So happy new year to you. And, you know, in this moment in time, we are taught by our prophecies. This is called the time of the seventh fire. And we are told in a lot of Indigenous prophecies that this is a time of great change. You know, we don't have the Armageddon concept. That's really a Christian concept, I think. I'm not sure, I'm not Christian. But we do have this concept of birth, life, death, and renewal, which is kind of what the cycle of life is. And so that is a little bit of this story in this time, in this moment we're in. I'm going to just show you some pictures from our work and then open up for some questions. But I live on the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota, and I am a farmer, basically, but I try to do my best in my little life here. So let me see what I got here. All right. So I have to turn this to the slide form. I always mess this up here. Oh, yay. But you can see this okay, huh? Where is the slide thing?
Oh. On the bottom, right hand
Thank you.
side, it looks like a
on the right hand side. Thank you. Bless you. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what is this you are asking? This is what biodiversity looks like. aptly pointed out, on a worldwide scale, Indigenous people represent about 4% of the world's population, but we live with about 75% of the world's biodiversity. And biodiversity is what you need to preserve. You know, you kind of have to keep the wild where the wild is. And in the world we live in, you know, basically humans are the T-Rexes. We are like consuming everything, eating it up, making garbage, just to be kind of simplify the world that we are in. But let's just get real, that's what's happening. So now they say that humans, there's more human stuff than all the biosphere. And we should kind of contemplate how messed up that is, if you understand what I'm saying, which is, you know, in the world we live in, we got more bikes and garbage and plastic things and hair dryers than elephants and the rest of the world. There's my better half walking across the back there. This is wild rice. This is what the wild things look like. And this is me and my good sister there, Dawn Goodwin, looking at that is all wild rice. That's a lake full of rice. And all you got to do is take care of your ecosystem. That's what I want to point out, is that if you can live with Mother Nature instead of trying to make Mother Nature live with you, you're going to do a lot better. Just a little point from Indigenous people. It's 10,000 years, lower rice lake harvest, the same thing. That's what sustainability looks like, right? And this is like kind of the history of America in a short note, the difference between Sitting Bull and Custer. Someone has one idea and someone has another. You know, and I'm going to propose to you that it's possible that the United States is not sustainable. I don't know if anybody wants to admit that, but I think it's about time that people admit that there's no explanation for ability for sustainability here. Now, this is the climate crisis we are talking about. You guys don't need a lecture on this. You know, we wouldn't be here talking about it if someone didn't have some sense, but you know, people always astonish me and they say, oh, you work on the environment. That's so cool. I was like, you live in the environment. That's pretty cool, huh? I mean, what are we thinking? You know, what are we thinking? Is this like not the same world? Do we not live in the same world where we have catastrophes of biblical proportions all around us, you know, and a pandemic, you know, it is a time for change. That's what our prophecy said. All our prophecies talk about the time of the seventh fire, when you have a choice between two paths. One path, they say, is well-worn and scorched. The other one is green. I feel like that's not just an Anishinaabe teaching. That's what our prophets told us. They said we need to choose between the paths. And so, the Biden administration has Build Back Better. That's not enough. Need a lot more than Build Back Better. You need to transform how we think and transform economic and ecological systems. So this is our little work in our community. So past 7 years, I've been fighting stupid pipeline projects. Should I just point this out to you? And what happens in late stage fossil fuel addiction, which is what we should all just admit we have. I'm an addict, you know, I'm a fossil fuel addict. I just want like a graceful transition out of this. You know, I feel like I lived my whole life in the fossil fuel era, but it's time to move on. And, you know, I mean, time to move on, like you don't need your Fiji water that travels 8,000 miles. You don't need you don't need the insanity of flowers from Colombia the next day. What you need is to figure out how to survive. But what happens is that we've so addicted to fossil fuels that basically we become addicts. I already said that. And the problem is that we let dealers make public policy. That is America. So you got this is Standing Rock in 2016. This is people saying, we want our water, we don't want a pipeline, and $38 million worth of military repression against Indigenous-led resistance to the Dakota Access Pipeline. You know, this is what, you know, it happens when you're a desperate addict, is you start repressing people to keep your fossil fuels going. And this is an example of what environmental injustice looks like. You know, my point is that, look, the original route was just north of the city of Bismarck, which is 95% white. But we didn't get that route. We got the route, oh, that's right next to Standing Rock, right? That is what racism looks like in infrastructure. That's what racism looks like in this country right now. And that is a textbook case of it, which is in African-American communities, in Hispanic communities, and in Indigenous communities. A lot in Indigenous communities because, well, we're landed people. We have 4% of the land. And so if they're going to go trash someone, it'd be us, you know, because we got some land. So this is what it looks like when you keep repressing your people. Oh, and then this is me. Oh my God, this is my last year. You know, I'm just still in recovery from my abuse by the Enbridge Corporation. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about line 3. Single largest tar sands pipeline in the country, shoved down our throats in the middle of a pandemic. This is from Enbridge, the Canadian multinational, which basically owns the Great Lakes. Why am I saying that? Because they have 7 pipes on the Great Lakes, and they circle the Great Lakes, and they bring 75% of the tar sands into this country, dirtiest oil in the world. So here we are trying to protect our territory. Here's a bunch of police outside my driveway one day, making sure nobody could leave. It's like use of, and the thing about the police in Minnesota is, as I mentioned, $38 million worth of military repression to pay for the police to repress the people in Standing Rock and in North Dakota. Well, in Minnesota, they're so smart. What did they do? They had the Canadian multinational pay for the police. Wait, let me get this right. $7 million worth of police underwritten entirely by a Canadian multinational in Minnesota. Now, I'm just posing this to you, my fellow Americans, that this is a little problematic when you have foreign corporations buying the police of Minnesota and incentivizing the arrest and abuse because they get paid for harassing us, right? 1,000 people arrested, 1,000 people arrested. And this is the people they're harassing. It looks like Woodstock or something, right? I mean, we're not, look at me. I'm like a 62-year-old Native woman. I'm not, what is this? What is this? I'm a water protector, but this is, most of these people were arrested, in the 1,000 people that were arrested. And this is one of my arrests. I say one of my arrests because I have charges in 3 counties as a water protector. You can't see me, but I'm over there in the far right of it. I'm sitting in a lawn chair because if you're gonna, this is the Shell River. The Shell River. I live by the Shell. I live by Shell Lake. The rice I harvest is from Shell Lake. The river goes through, it's a pristine river. Enbridge decides to cross the river 5 times. Kind of like the roll of the dice. Good luck on that one, right? So here we are. I'm appointed the guardian of the river by my tribe. I'm there and I'm sitting in a lawn chair, for 4 hours before they arrested us. But these are my grandchildren. These are my grandchildren. Well, the right side is my grandchildren, nieces and nephews on the other side. Well, what am I trying to tell you? I'm trying to tell you, first of all, this is what resistance looks like. This is what resistance looks like on the front lines of Indigenous people. And I also want to say is if you're going to invest in your 401k, invest in your grandchildren too, right? Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Like my 401k ain't going to be worth nothing. I don't know how you're thinking about this, but I'm going to invest in these guys to figure out the future. So this is my life. This is the evil corporation going, look at all those lines that are Enbridge lines, brought us the Kalamazoo spill, all kind of stuff, right? Two single largest oil spills inland in the United States, both Enbridge. Yet it got these permits and now it's trying to shove its way across the Great Lakes, shove its way through Michigan. Governor Whitmer, who's apparently, what did they let go? She's Michigan. She said no to Enbridge. Big Gretch, but I saw her trial about the kidnappers and 2 of them got let off. I don't know if you remember this little thing. They tried to kidnap the governor of Michigan with right-wing guys. They get let off. This is what I mean. It's like, corporate control. And this is the Great Lakes. This is a blow up of a energy plant refinery on the shore of Superior a couple years ago. So what is my point? It's the end of the party. Fossil fuels, I'm ready for a elegant transition out of this. Infrastructure is crumbling. And this is not just us. I'm just saying we got a D in infrastructure in this country and energy infrastructure is crumbling. Stuff gets old, stuff falls apart. Time to clean up the mess and move towards the next economy. So fortunately, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the fabulous life we have in defeating corporations to the best of our ability, but that our primary strategy is to build the next economy. Why? Because that's our prophecies. You take the green path and you light the 8th fire because you have done the right thing. So some people call this the Green New Deal or I call it the Sitting Bull plan. The Sitting Bull was a great political leader. And he said, let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. So we'll show you a couple slides. Here I am racing on Shell Lake with my grandson last year. My life. worth fighting for, right? Worth fighting for to keep that. This is my little farm. This is the boys who moved in with me in the pandemic. I mean, some people went home, I went home, and all those kids moved in because I had horses, right? So I've been living with like all these teenage boys for the past 2 years, and all these women. We're rebuilding a food system with no fossil fuels in it, or as little as we can, because we're doing horse-drawn agriculture and growing biodiverse potatoes. Because in a time of climate change, you don't want a monocrop, right? I'm just being honest. You know, there's no smart crop variety that's going to save you. You got to have agro biodiversity, and you got to move from fossil fuels. That's what we're doing. I don't grow all these kinds of potatoes, but we did grow 17 kinds a couple of years ago. Transform our food system. We'll talk about this later, but y'all know this. You know, don't be pigs, and don't expect that you're going to get your milk from California. Got to get your fossil fuels out of your food system and relocalize it. And then grow some hemp. This is what you guys were asking me about. So I'm a hemp farmer because hemp is the answer to the fossil fuel economy. I didn't believe it, but this is what we got, fiber hemp. You know, I'm in support of legalization of cannabis, but my interest is in fiber hemp. The guy who just walked through is one of those guys in there. And then I got some sons in there and some cousins and nephews, but this is our hemp field. And that's what I'm talking about. Grows super fast, grows like a weed. And when it grows really tall and fast, it sucks down all this carbon in it. And so it's one of the best things to sequester carbon. And what do we need to do? We need to keep the carbon in the soil and not in the air. And how you're going to do that best is with hemp. I mean, we could like make up that there's a carbon sequestration fairy, which is what the Biden administration seems to think there is. There isn't a carbon sequestration fairy. Quit doing dumb stuff and grow hemp to get it back into your soil, you know? So this stuff, you can, you know, quit clear cutting forests. You can make paper out of it and make cardboard out of it. Oh, you can make hemp wood out of it. You know, you can make structural materials out of it. You can make hempcrete out of it. And my particular work is in textiles. So just think about this. The word canvas comes from cannabis. Did y'all hear what I said? The word canvas comes from cannabis. All those sales, everything. And cotton is not your answer, nor is all the fossil fuels we're wearing on our body like nylon and polyester. Got to quit slathering ourselves with fossil fuels and go to this. In the construction business, this is hempcrete, hemp insulation, and this is us. You know, this is hemp insulation I just installed in a tiny home, right? Because, and that's like fiberglass, but it doesn't itch and it's not toxic. So, and then this is a Navajo rug with hemp in it. So I'm not going to talk a lot more, but what I was just trying to point out is you can also make batteries, because it turns out that when they suck down the carbon, it somehow is magical, way above my head. But anyway, very high in graphene and more powerful than lithium. In the next couple of years, the breakthrough is going to be in hemp batteries, which is what you need. You need electric cars, an electric system beyond fossil fuels, and you need some recycled batteries. Anyway, that is, you know, I could talk endlessly, as you've gathered, about our work. But what I wanted to say, like, basically, what's the gist of this? The gist is resist, resist, resist. The longer you fight a project, the more expensive it is. And we must resist them. While the movement for divestment grows, the Saudi sovereign fund moves out of the tar sands, the Norwegians, you know what I'm saying? And in the same time, you got to make the next economy. The solar, renewable energy, super efficient, and hemp economy with local foods. Anyway, oh my gosh, I don't know how long I talked, but I was trying to talk short. So thank you and happy for questions. Yeah, but I wanted to give you a picture of what we do. We good?
Yeah, so we're going to move on to a few prepared questions that I have for you, and then we'll move on to the audience Q&A. So if anybody is going to ask a question after we get through these prepared questions, either privately message me or privately message Joanna or raise your hand. So my first question for you is, it's inspired by the phrase, the personal is political. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, especially with this type of event. And I just want to know how you how your personal life experiences have affected your activism in both Indigenous rights and the climate movement.
Well, first of all, I come from good people. Very helpful. You know, my mother's house here. My mother was a civil rights, anti-war activist, father, Indian activist, environmental. You know what I'm saying? I was raised by people that said, working class people. You know, I don't come from rich people, but they just said, do the right thing, you know? So I was raised to do the right thing. I wasn't raised to take advantage of people. And then you get privilege. I'm so privileged. Look, I go off to Harvard, I'm an economist. So what do you do with your privilege, right? You want to hoard it? You want to amass a great amount of money and be miserable in your penthouse, you know? Or you want to go and farm and hang out with all kind of people and raise horses and, oh my God, so much more fun. So what I'm saying is that I come from good people, and I believe that you should use your powers. You should use your powers to do the right thing. And in the meantime, you should also be really happy because life is great. Be grateful and make your life great. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that was it.
Thank you. My next question focuses on, I guess, the most urgent struggles going on right now. So what do you feel are the most urgent struggles going on in Indigenous territory here in the United States, specifically surrounding environment and climate mobilization? And then if you are interested, if you could answer what you think the most urgent struggles abroad might be too, that would be very interesting to hear.
Well, obviously war is not healthy for the environment. I mean, the war, the US military is the single largest polluter in the world. I mean, so, I could talk about all kind of stuff, but the fact is that the military is a disaster. And what you need is a peacetime military. I mean, imagine if we spent that budget on cleaning up messes. That's what we need to do. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be like, if they're going to have the military budget, pay those guys to do something good, However, that's like a big global perspective, right? But I'm saying you need a Marshall Plan or a Sitting Bull Plan to transform the infrastructure that is failing in this country, to rebuild and restore, and you need a massive amount of investment to do that. And some of that, you could well put the military to work in that because they made the mess. However, in North America, these struggles over pipelines are brutal. The largest pipeline struggle is Line 5, Enbridge 5.0. They got in Line 3, arresting 1,000 people, buying the police of Minnesota, I think it's called regulatory capture, when you control the regulatory system, a foreign corporation. Just take notes. Foreign corporations control Minnesota's regulatory system. So pipeline battles, Line 5, Straits of Mackinac. Question I would ask is, should a Canadian pipeline company hold the Great Lakes hostage? Thacker Pass, those guys are fighting lithium mining out there, and they're fighting Tesla, Elon Musk and his enormous ego. I'm saying that there's all kind of battles to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and those continue. And internationally, people are protecting, they're just trying to live their lives. But my point is that a lot of these are resource wars. Ukraine is not just it's also a resource war because Ukraine is very wealthy, right? And so quit, the colonization and these guys never ending and insatiable. And so we need to cut back our habits, quit being addicts, and, do our best.
Thank you. My next question is, what do you feel is the biggest obstacle in your personal career in environmental activism that you've had to overcome? Was this sometime very early on in your career? Was this very recently? I'd like to know a little more about that.
I mean, get real. There's obstacle after obstacle for an Indigenous woman trying to protect her land and water. I mean, that's all they got is obstacles for us. Personally, I spent a lot of time, I see a lot of other women of color on here. You go in a room and, they don't want to listen to you. You're the last person. So, let's just take about the energy industry. It's almost all white men. So someone like me goes in and they're like, what are you, bringing us coffee? Literally. I mean, you know, and so you have to, you know, you need a seat at the table, and you demand your seat. But, you know, the other thing is that, you know, obviously you guys invited me here to lecture. I mean, I remember one time I was down at the New Mexico Public Service Committee testifying on a carbon cap hearing. They brought me in as an expert witness. I spent 4 hours on the stand getting questioned by the utilities and the oil companies. And at a certain point, the guy says to me, he says, where's your foot? You know, he asked me about my footnotes. He kept asking me about my footnotes. I said, well, the footnotes are accurate. I said, are you going to ask me anything more substantive than about my footnotes? He says, you know, who said that? I said, I said that. He's looking at my testimony. I said, he said, well, how'd you say that? I said that because I'm the expert witness. And so I get to say things. I mean, just the inherent, you know, bias, you know, in these industries. But, you know, my most challenging, you know, year was last year. I mean, I camped for 5 months facing this pipeline company, facing arrest every day, trying to keep people from not getting arrested, trying to stop the company, trying to hold someone accountable. Huge emotional toll, you know, huge impact, surveillance, arrests, you know, pretty traumatic. I didn't get beat up by the cops. They were a little too afraid, I suppose, but I did spend 3 nights in jail, you know.
Thank you. My next question actually focuses on the United Nations, ironically. So with the forthcoming UN Permanent Forum on the world's Indigenous peoples, it's scheduled the 25th of April, so it's only a few days from now, through the early part of May. I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts as to whether or not you believe that the UN is a useful space for talking about Indigenous issues, given that many nations have backtracked on their promises to Indigenous peoples.
Well, to be clear, before you were born, that's so funny to be able to say that. Anyway, in 1977, I went to the United Nations for the first UN conference on the rights of Indigenous people. I was 18 years old, you know, and I went there, I mean, because I was an energy geek, you know, and they were like, no, you need to go and testify, because I knew a lot about uranium mining. I mean, you know, you guys can see I'm kind of geeky. And so, you know, I went there and I saw, you know, Indigenous people from all around the world, but great leaders, great chiefs who have made these journeys to say to the United Nations, we are human. We are people. We have a right to our territory, to our language, to our religion, to our children, to our water. You know, I saw that. I bore witness to that, you know, and I have never forgotten, you know, the significance of that. I continued my UN work for 4 years. I largely quit in 81, and I decided to instead focus on transforming my community, you know, and the dynamics of power, and being one of the communities that exercised self-determination and our rights. You know, and I see that in our battles, and it depends on who it is. You know, you are a tribe or a nation, and you're out there, and they are going to wail on you. I mean, they kill Indigenous people, you know, Colombia, Honduras, Brazil, Mexico. People like me are dead. I am still here. You know, I'm fully aware of the fact that if I was in a different country, I would be dead. You know, how do you draw attention to these people? How do you draw attention to the people of the rainforest? You have to leave your country to do that, you know, because the repression is so great inside your country, you know, that you must go to international forums. So, you know, I do believe that there is a good role for international forums. You know, I feel like that the complexity of change and transformation from the, you know, not only the rights of Indigenous people, but ultimately to the rights of nature is occurring. But it's occurring because of a complex set of factors. So one is ongoing international presence of Indigenous people in forums, to the point where now I can't remember which, you know, international covenant, it was recognizing Indigenous peoples and biodiversity. You know, protect Indigenous peoples to protect biodiversity. That's a recent, you know, that's a recent one, you know, that we got so that people understand that we are the people that take care of the biodiversity, and you need biodiversity, which COVID should have taught us because it came from a bat who was displaced, right? I mean, you crunch biodiversity and you do that. So I think that there is, you know, a movement in those arenas. At the same time, I see that, you know, you need litigation. You need countries like Ecuador to declare the rights of nature in 2008. And then in 2021, I don't know if any of you are watching this, the Ecuadorian Constitutional Court throws out mining corporations, Ecuadorian and Canadian, and says rights of nature supersede rights of mining corporations. So that is a different arena, right? But that's an international, there's a national arena and an international arena on the rights of nature. The struggles, you know, of holding corporations and governments accountable through measures, and particularly through, you know, shareholders resolutions and divestment, is another strategy. So the United Nations is an essential part of a strategy, but it's a part of a complex, you know, network or web of movements. And so I never, you know, discard any, you know, I never discard any strategy. And there's many strategies that need, and different people have different gifts. You know, I myself, not so much the gift of international travel. I you know, I do, but prefer to farm.
Thank you so much. Before I ask my last question, I'm actually getting some really good questions from the audience. So I think I'm going to move on to audience Q&A because some of these questions are actually overlapping.
Yeah, I see they got questions. I think that's great.
So my first question is from Sanjita, who she messaged me privately. She asked, considering how much of the climate crisis is the result of corporate decision-making, what do you believe is the best thing that we as students can do to help combat this? Do you feel that individual sustainable actions are worth taking, or should we focus our efforts on protesting and applying pressure onto corporations? Or is there some sort of combination of both?
A combination of both. You know, we should not be jerks. We should be examples. We should do our best. But you should not lose all your hair trying to figure out, like I do. I mean, not gonna say I lose my hair on it, but every day I'm like, oh, I can't buy that. That's got too much carbon footprint. I mean, you know what I'm saying is like, we're all looking at it. And in that process, you realize how jacked up the system is on like the steroids of you know, material economy. So, you know, you do keep pushing in the individual actions. You carry your water bottle, you quit with the styrofoam, you know, and you know, you continue to, you know, grow, you know, be responsible in your behavior. You garden, you show people that it is possible to take back power. You show people that you can ride your darn bike. You know, you show people that maybe you do something even more innovative like big gardening, or, you know, I'm all for the bike powered cell phone chargers. You know, then you go after the big guys, because certainly they try to put the onus on us, like help us save the environment. No, you're the jerks. You need to quit. You know, help us, give us a little donation, buy more Shell oil. Really? You know what I'm saying is that don't go corporate greenwashing. Don't let them pretend they got this. In the case that we're working on now, though, you also work on the market. So I see they're going to get $1 billion in climate smart commodities out there, which is probably complete BS. You know, and Biden, right? This is his plan. So I'm looking at that, and they're going to let corporations use fertilizers and grow climate smart commodities. Well, using fertilizer is not climate smart. Organic is climate smart, right? So for us, I'm pushing hemp. I mean, you heard me before, I'm like pushing hemp like it's, you know, not going out of style, it's coming in style, right? So I'm like, get yourselves to the table, you old big ag. Let's clean your stuff up with some hemp. So I intend to grow, you know, over the next couple of years, in 2 years, I intend to have 600 acres of hemp and a hemp mill. That's what I'm going to do. That's my goal for fabric. That's my goal. And you know what that's going to do? That's going to be, and you know what? In 2023, next year in the spring, Patagonia, the fancy company, is releasing a bag of mine, of ours. It's a collaborative between me and Patagonia. It's my hemp and their Patagonia. So what's that going to do to the old jealous industry? Right. I'm like, yeah, do something cool, guys. Don't be jerks. So show the example. That's what I want to say, because they have no idea what they're doing. If you are waiting for them to show you what to do, you'll be waiting a long time. In the meantime, planet's going to bake and more things are going to go bad. So do the great things and then they follow. That's my school of organizing.
Thank you. Our next question is actually from Gloria Green, and they ask, how do you stay motivated to stand your ground when you see these big corporations that are so powerful against the decrease of fossil fuels?
Well, you know, we defeated a lot of these projects. My life, be scrappy, hang in. Could you say that a few times? Be scrappy, hang in. Longer you hang in, more expensive their project gets. More expensive their project gets. So finally someone says that's a really bad idea. I've seen that happen time and time and time and time and again. You know, I wish that had worked, you know. I mean, KXL pipeline's not getting built because of scrappy people, litigation, organizing. You know what I'm saying? The Keystone pipeline not getting built, right? But so what I'm saying is like, you know, you got to stick at it, but then don't let them own you or your spirit. You know, I mean, you know, on one hand, you fight these guys and you look across the horizon and you see other people duking it out with them. Know that you're not alone. You know, we're part of a social movement of water protectors. It's international. Social movements for justice. And you know, during the pandemic, I mean, Arundhati Roy, the great Indian writer, she talks about pandemic as portal. She says that pandemics force societies to change. This one is no different. It's a portal between one world and the next. She says, what are you going to carry through the portal? Your dirty data banks, your dirty rivers, your avarice, your hatred? Or are you going to walk through clean? My point is that in this time of the pandemic, all hell broke loose. We had to change everything. And then look out there. Don't be discouraged. Look at the social movement that emerged during the pandemic from George Floyd. You know, never in my life did I think I would see 44 statues of Columbus fall in a year. You know what I'm saying? Like all my life, I had to choke down those damn statues of Columbus and those conquistadors and Confederate soldiers like they were somebody we should celebrate. They're gone. They're gone. So, you know, remember, we're part of a big world and we have a lot of privilege, us first world North Americans. So, you know, hang in there and look out there and be inspired by your people who are duking it out and who are growing cool food and cool hemp, you know?
Thank you. And I was gonna move on in order, but there's actually one question I got that reminds me that what you were talking about, I think it would be a good jumping off point. Sanjita also asked, can you speak more to how the pandemic has exacerbated many of the issues that you've been fighting for?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, they got a pipeline through in the pandemic as a, what's it called? Essential infrastructure? Bullshit. The Canadian pipeline for tar sands oil is not essential infrastructure. You know, it's not a public pipeline. I mean, I'm charged with trespass on critical infrastructure. It's not critical infrastructure. That's, you know, it's not public infrastructure. You know, if it was public, I'd have a little spigot for my car. So clarified a few things, you know, during the pandemic, like, you know, how crazy you could be. And then I changed my life because I moved in with, I mean, I had a bunch of 15-year-old boys that moved in. And, you know, I had like this, like the systems are failing. I mean, everybody saw that. Food systems failing, energy systems failing, everything is lined up over there in San Diego, can't get parts for your car. So, you know, I was forced to, you know, and I quit traveling, which, you know, I could stick with that. But my point is that in the midst of that, we found ourselves. A lot of people started to garden. A lot of people, instead of their stressful, let me wage slave my way out there, you know, they had to stay home. And they had to, and then they got to hang out with their kids. And then it turns out a lot of them don't even want to go back to work. You see that, the great quit or whatever that's called, you know, the great resignation. I mean, people want to come work for me who are like, we're done. I'm done with all that. I need to do something that has meaning. I think we had to reckon with ourselves during that. And, for me, certainly, I reckoned with myself. I said, I'm just going to dig in deeper and do more, because in the end, 5 years from now, I'm going to be able to eat. I'm going to have some solar projects to heat my community, because we realized that this is, I think everybody was like, wow, we got to better change things up. So I don't want to say I'm grateful to the pandemic, but sobered me up. Hope it's sobered everybody else up too, from our, whatever our ideas, our material, fossil fuels, fast, entitled lifestyle, made us reckon with what was of value. Who were you going to see, right? Who were you going to see? Who did you want to be with? And we need some clarifying, because most of us, I always laugh because people talk about how free they are and how great it is. I was like, what? Most people spend most of their time looking at something that big. That doesn't seem too free to me.
Yeah, for sure. Our next question is from Zainab, and she asks, how much of a difference do small things that we do really help our environment? For example, she cites taking shorter showers or recycling, among other things.
Well, first of all, quit with the materials economy. Quit buying stuff. Quit going to H&M. I don't want to say it, but basically fast fashion is like one of the fastest growing toxic industries in the world. Fast fashion, right? Go get yourself some used clothes like me. This is a 50-year-old jacket that my mother's. Very nice though. But my point is that just quit consuming so much. Sober up your consumption and just quit. Get local. All of those things transform. But your power has to be aggregated. You need to set up a local buying. You need to support local food farmers markets. You need to have local solar. It's called community solar. That's what we need to do. You want to hang out, or you want to look like Texas the next crisis? You don't want to look like Texas. You want to look like enlightened people who sobered up and realized that we had some choices and we should make them.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Andrea Flores, who asks, how can we as college students help the earth on a daily basis? I guess this is very similar to the other one. I guess, what little things can we do?
All of the above, plus get yourselves, be coherent and thoughtful. Like, reject the banking concept of education, learn critical thinking, and figure out what you are in it. Take some responsibility, because, we live in a society, America that is, really rights-based. My right to do this, my right to do that. I'm going to do this because I can. My right, my right, my right. Nobody has any responsibility. The other half of rights is responsibility. Take some responsibility. Don't blame other people. Here I am, just feel like I'm lecturing to my kids or my staff. Well, my point is look, everybody wants to talk about, and it's abstract and it's far away. And I was like, do the right thing in your life, make that larger, speak against what's wrong, find the opportunity that is in your place to be transformational, add your voice to international and national battles. Who's gonna get Clarence Thomas removed? You know what I'm saying? It's like, we're all watching the same things. We are watching, we would all like, I would assume, some kind of working government. I think that'd be fabulous. But that's going to take y'all working on it. You can't be apathetic on it. I do my part. Everybody got to do their part, whatever it is, So, we could say, get out and vote. Oh, but that's not enough. You got to get out and vote. You got to organize other people to vote. You got to, talk about what the real issues are and have candidates come to the issues rather than try to figure out which of the bad choices you're going to have. I'm thinking of running for governor again myself. I mean, I'm just like so disgusted with the governor of Minnesota, right? I just feel like that, you need systems that work, and so you need to start engaging. And then also, don't put all your beliefs in the electoral process. I know that sounds kind of, I don't know what that sounds like. It doesn't really matter. But my point is that that's not enough. Be like me, change the economic systems. I mean, because that once we get the hemp economy going, everybody's going to want to be in it. But it was illegal until 2014 to grow industrial hemp. I've been growing for 7 years. I mean, this is my 7th year, right? And this year I'm going to grow bigger than ever. And, I'm so excited about it. So do something, be epic. Be epic. Everybody's got a shot at being epic. So figure out how to take your shot. Do something epic and courageous and, hopefully not too foolhardy. But,
I'm really loving this advice. It's very encouraging. And I guess this kind of goes with Colin's question, who asks, in your experience, have you seen much progress? Have you seen any local or state politicians incorporating your ideas in action through law? Has there been political talk about incorporating your ideas, or has the progress mostly been movement-wise?
No, I'd see it. Obviously the rights of nature in Ecuador. I mean, my tribe, rights of nature of wild rice, rights of wild rice. And then my tribe sued the state for the violation of the rights of wild rice. I feel like that I see these kind of progress, and I see that like in the state of Minnesota, built on the bones of my ancestors, duking it out with them. Well, now they say, first of all, our rights recognized to harvest wild rice anywhere in the state without a permit. I'm gonna get a permit issued to me for turkey hunting now by the tribe off reservation. And then this last year, after I camped for 5 months in a state campground, the state of Minnesota said that they're going to let Indian people go to state campgrounds without paying a fee. I was like, and the DNR came to see me. I was like, they said, what are you doing? I said, I'm moving back to the campground. It's nice camping. But my point is that that was a very small change. But they felt, and also the state of Minnesota also gave free tuition to all Indian people for the university colleges, right? And that's because the University of Minnesota, like a lot of other schools, was built on land grants of our land. Like 62 million acres worth of land grants. Cornell was the biggest taker. So my point is that justice looks like the people you stole from should get something back. And as a matter of fact, we should get land back. So I got to give a lecture later today on buffalo, and I was looking, last year the Buffalo National Bison Range was returned to the Salish and Kootenai tribe. They should have had it from the start. It was carved out of their reservation by a racist administration that felt that the very people who protected the buffalo shouldn't be able to care for them, that the feds were better. Well, they're getting it back this year. They got it back last year. So I'm like, change happens, We don't necessarily know how it's going to happen, but you guys got to keep the pressure up, and then also be like, I don't want to say align the planets, but be open, for good. I think that's really important, is to be open for the good thing to come. I mean, everybody here who's on this call knows the power of positive thinking, right? I mean, if you want to, don't bother being dour. You're just going to get yourself sick. Advice from older woman. So, do your best. Be grateful. Miracles. Pray for miracles.
Thank you. I actually feel like that answers the next question, which was from Julian, who asked to how people have a doom and gloom perspective and how to stay optimistic. So I feel like that answers that question. And I just want to make sure I'm being respectful of your time. You need to log off at 12:20, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. So we have time for about one or two more questions then. So Sanjita also asks, do you feel that the land back movement is essential to helping address the climate crisis effectively?
I do. You know, these discussions of biodiversity and Indigenous people, we're the people. I like Francine's iPhone and Francine there driving in her car. Hi, Francine. I like seeing the people on the Zoom. Oh, I saw Lauren a little while ago too. Unless you guys could put your things on, I don't care. I like seeing people. Anyway, I feel like that you know, the only compensation for land is land. You know, all Indigenous people know that, because we're not, that's what we need, is land to care for ourselves and care for, you know, and we know how to take care of land. And so the movement to return lands to Indigenous peoples is growing. You know, I was just in Eureka, California, where the Wiyot tribe got Indian island returned to them after 150 years. They massacred all the people on that island, and then the city was holding it. They just returned it to them, you know. That was good. That was good, you know, and the National Bison Range returning, and us with the help of generous donors. Enbridge, the corporation I fought for 7 years, bought the land around my organization, two sides of my organization, to intimidate us. I'm saying we have 40 acres. They had 120 acres, like in an L shape around my organization. So they could conduct surveillance and just be complete jerks and intimidate us. The end of the battle, on line 3, I call up the project manager. I texted him. I said, Paul, best of my ability, I didn't stop your pipeline. I'd like that land now. You gonna sell it to me, or are you gonna give it to me? He sold it to us. And so I have land, you know. Over the past 6 months, I bought about 800 acres of land. Doesn't cut, you know, stop the hole in my heart, you know, for the pipeline. But I know that that's land that we're going to grow hemp on, that we're going to restore, and we're going to make beautiful. And that's something that's worth something, you know, and that's how change is made. The hands of individuals. There's not like a social change fairy. You know, it's people who make the change, and working together, you can transform ecosystems. That's the truth. You know, so that's our work, is to, you know, grow hemp, Indigenous crops, restore our berries, restore our prairies. You know, I'm not going to say restore our buffalo. Someone else is doing that, but we might do that too. I mean, and the lecture I'm giving later today is about the Buffalo Commons. I think that there's, you know, 50 tribes that are members of the Intertribal Bison Cooperative. Those guys are returning buffalo to all of their lands, and there's an international treaty on buffaloes. Buffalo, there's an S at the end.
Thank you. And before I ask my last question, I just want to remind everybody in the audience here, do not log off after Winona leaves, because Professor Mario Murillo will be leading a talk back discussion about what she's been talking about. So please be sure to stay and engage in that. And I guess my final question for you before you leave is, how can non-Indigenous allies in the climate movement support Indigenous voices?
Well, you know, you could support us in all the ways that we need support, which is typical. You know, that's to say that, you know, support us politically in these battles, sign all the endless petitions, you know, so it's not an isolated Native nation, you know, because we're geographically isolated. Most people would not know where my reservation is, you know, forever. My point is that, you know, be the people who support Indigenous people politically, because the power is, you know, we have power, but there's a different kind of power in the numbers, you know, of non-Indigenous allies, right? Join social movements, you know, and then, you know, and then at the same time, remember that, you know, we are tied together, because to the extent that America keeps, you know, consuming so much, it's going to keep coming to Indian people and saying, I need this, I need this, I need this. You know, so be part of a movement to transform the damn country, you know, transform things so that it's a just economy where people of all kinds are treated with dignity, and food systems and water systems, you know, all of that is cared for. You know, you can always go to Honor the Earth. That's our organization. And, you know, that's, we always take donations. We'll buy some more land and fight some more bad guys. You know, you could always support, you know, frontline groups financially. and some people, like over the last couple of years, I mean, they had, small, not small things, but students would organize to support something, and and then sometimes they'd send out people too. So there's a lot of ways to do things, but there's Indigenous people in all parts of this country, and find out who's local and find out what's going on. Figure out how to ally with that. That's always a good thing to do.
Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. This has been absolutely wonderful and informative, unlike any other event that we've done really at Hofstra. Do you have anything you'd like to share before you leave?
No, I mean, I just am honored to hang out with you guys. Zoom is great because it's not so stressful for me to travel, but I always like to, see people in person, and I'm grateful that you are all, having these discussions, and, grateful to be at the table with y'all in this moment, and, have heart, look out there, and I live in the same world you do. I see people going like this. I was at this Kellogg meeting about a month ago, and everybody said, let me just check in. How are you feeling? And then someone would say, resilient. And then someone else would say, like, anxious. And everybody was like super stressed out. Then they came to me and I was like, excited. Because I'm going to grow hemp. I'm going to make the new green revolution. What's not to be excited about? Spring's coming, and I'm going to plant all kinds of revolutionary stuff and feed my people. So, that's what I'm saying is it's like, spring's here. Happy New Year. Do something great. That's your chance, be happy and do the right thing. Do the right thing. So, Miigwech, thank you all so much. I'll put my little our Honor the Earth in there so that you guys know how to get us. That's me. You can follow us online. We just updated our website, so we're like way cooler. I mean, I think it's up. It's going to be up like tomorrow or something. I was like, oh my God, that's like last year's website. Same problems everybody else has. Last year's website, you can't do that, right? So that could be your gift too. That's the other thing, is everybody has a gift. Maybe you're not going to farm hemp, but maybe you could do a website for little groups like us. That's cool too, right? Do something great with your gifts. Listen, all, thank you so much for having me, and Philip, for your persistence to make it happen.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being with us. It's been an honor.
Yes, honor to be with you guys. Have a really good day. Okay.
Oh, and thank you. I went to Hofstra. I thought you were going to have it real. I just came home and I finally caught you at the end.
Oh, well, I think it's recorded, sister. Francine, you can watch me record it. And I'm sorry I didn't go there in person. It was a little bit of a stretch for me. I'm trying to cut my carbon footprint, and I'm sitting here at my mother's house, and you don't want to mess with your mother. Better to take an hour than miss the time with mom, right?
Oh, but I'm so glad I caught you at the end. You're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Francine. Thanks to all of you. Miigwech.
Yes, yes,
Alex?
yes.
And so moving on, I want to introduce Mario Murillo, who is a professor of radio, television, and film in the Department of the Lawrence Herbert School of Communications here at Hofstra University. He's a journalism professor, and he also teaches Latin American and Caribbean studies courses. And he's also been instrumental in the implementation of many Indigenous Peoples Days events on Hofstra's campus. So I'd like to introduce him and thank him for leading a little talk back session, and he will let us reflect on what we just learned.
Well, thank you, Alex, and everybody. And to be honest, I don't know how to follow up with Winona. She's so charismatic and dynamic, and kind of expected her to be that way. So I'd rather hear more from the students and all the people who are from the community who are joining. I just think that if there's one takeaway that I think is important, and I guess it's tied to the title, Indigenous Voices in the Fight for Climate Change. But when she said at the end that we have to work together, I think this is the key message that in my engagement for now decades with the Indigenous movement throughout the Americas is the message that that's always resonated with me. that the message isn't an indigenous message. It's predominantly coming from indigenous communities, but it's a global message. It's a human message, right? It's about saving the planet. And I point to, I mean, she pointed to the 1977, the first UN summit that took place to call attention to the rights of indigenous communities. And that built for years. It was considered the most important international forum for indigenous communities to mobilize. And we're not just talking about North America, we're talking about indigenous communities globally, but 9,000, or at least 5,000 different indigenous nations and communities from around the world, Africa, Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, throughout the world, where indigenous communities have been marginalized, discriminated against, targeted, and they had that space, and it led up to a lot of action that took place in the UN at the UN level. Mass movements were calling for respect for their territorial rights, their cultural rights, etc. But the message was in defense of Mother Earth. And unfortunately, and we saw this in Colombia and Guatemala and Bolivia and Latin America in particular. That's the area that I've most closely worked in and understood from the early 90s. The message wasn't just about indigenous concerns. It was about human concerns, right? The indigenous communities in Colombia, for example, when they were calling for the reform of the Constitution in the early 90s, 1991, they were saying, we are part of the Colombian nation, and you need to recognize us as such, because we want to defend and protect the territories. But as long as we're being targeted, we can't, right? And the response has been traditionally from governments, from industry, and from the media, that of course are part and parcel of the same, has always been to clump them down and say, well, those are indigenous concerns, right? So it's either you kind of create this fantasy about what it means to be indigenous, and you have this benevolent care about the indigenous peoples of the world, or in the case of Colombia or Guatemala, etc. But on the other hand, you continue to marginalize them because they're backwards, because it's not realistic, because they're trying to stump development and economic opportunity for the rest of the country. And again, going back to some of the cases throughout the Americas. And it was really only, I would say that really in 1994 with the Zapatista uprising, which I know many of you are familiar with, and you probably studied the Zapatista uprising in southern Mexico in 1994, indigenous-led, Mayan-led, did we start to hear a discourse that said, no, this is not, the issues that they're raising are not simply indigenous issues. These are global, these are universal issues of rights that we all should have, and it's all in defense of Mother Earth. It's all in defense of the territory, right? And so we started seeing a much broader perspective, a much broader recognition of that, leading up to the battle against global trade and globalization in the late 1990s, leading up eventually to what we saw here in the US with Occupy Wall Street, all of those incorporating the same discourse and the same arguments that were being raised against capitalism, against extractive industries throughout the world, against mass levels of consumption, against the need for economic growth for our countries to survive and for people to have normal and good lives, totally counter to the indigenous movement. Only then did we start hearing it in a much more global scale. Again, looking at Latin America in particular. So I think if there's one takeaway is that when we talk about indigenous rights, we're talking about global rights, and we're talking about protection of territory, and we're talking about protection of the earth. And so you see some gains, some steps forward, but a lot of steps back. And I think that's the challenge that we have, is to where, how do we kind of continue moving forward? So I suppose that was sort of what you wanted to talk about here in the wake of what Winona LaDuke was describing. I think the bottom line is that as long as indigenous communities are presented as alone in this fight, right, to protect the land, we're all going to lose, right? So, I mean, maybe that's a little simplistic in summarizing it, but that's what I've gained in my years of engaging with and working with communities, particularly in Latin America and South America, and to a lesser extent here in North America. So I don't know if we want to open that up, or if anybody has any additional thoughts on that.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our time.
Wow, okay.
We have until 12:45, Phil.
I'm looking at the wrong, I'm sorry. Thank you for that.
Yes, I'm so
looking at the
sorry.
wrong slot on my, okay.
No, you're fine. I actually did receive a question in my chat from Sanjita, and this might not have to do with exactly what you were talking about, but it still is an interesting question nonetheless. And she asked if you know if Hofstra itself ever divested from fossil fuels. She knows that there was a movement a few years ago to like reduce our carbon footprint, but do you know specifically if we've ever followed through on that?
I don't know. That's a good thing to look into, to find out what exactly are the investments in our, from the university standpoint. I would be surprised if we don't have levels of investment in fossil fuels, considering the size of our endowment and the growth that it has experienced in the last 20 years. So that's a good question, and that's something worth exploring. I remember years ago, this must have been about 17, 18 years ago, here at Hofstra, there was a campaign against Coca-Cola. This goes back to my organizing around Colombia. There was a whole movement to get Hofstra University to stop buying Coca-Cola products or incorporating Coca-Cola products in our vending machines and our food places because of the role Coca-Cola played in, ironically, targeting groups using paramilitaries, including indigenous communities in Colombia. One of the people involved in that campaign was Jessica Ramos, who's currently a state senator here in New York, and I remember she was involved in that actively. And eventually, I mean, I think it was a successful campaign in getting Coca-Cola out of Hofstra. So that's just a message to say that if there is a campaign organized here through folks like yourself, Alex, and others from CCE and others who are concerned about these issues, I think it might be worth pursuing. I better keep my mouth shut though, because I might get in trouble for saying that. Carrie.
Yeah. On that note of getting in trouble, I think we should be willing to take that risk though, because I mean, there were students, as was mentioned in the question from the student, there were students some years ago who tried to contact the Hofstra administration about divestments from fossil fuel. And they were told, when they finally got a very short answer in an email, that was the answer was that we don't involve ourselves with political decisions in our investments, but isn't it a political decision to decide that it's okay to invest in fossil fuels? So yeah, I think we need to be courageous and really look into where our investments are going, and also where our pension investments are going, because TIAA-CREF also has a lot on their conscience, which we can talk about another time. But my question to you, Mario, was, or to anybody, is to follow up on what Winona said at the end, towards the end, of the importance of finding out what is happening here locally. So in New York State, for example, or even Long Island, when it comes to Indigenous people and how we can get on board supporting Indigenous people. So do anyone have any experience in that? And so, for example, in my classes, sometimes when we talk about Indigenous issues and we read texts that kind of boils down to texts written by Indigenous people, boiling down to the importance of land and the importance of getting more land so that Indigenous people can actually practice, the type of hunting and farming and fishing and all of that, and restoring ecosystems like we talked about. But then it's oftentimes reluctance from students, for example, in the form of saying something like, well, that sounds really nice, but isn't that totally unrealistic? So do anyone know about any examples here in New York State of, buying back land and so on?
mean, there's been a lot of battles. I haven't been up to date with a lot of them upstate, Mohawk territory, and there's always been struggles there. I remember there was Ganajihaje was the name of the community that they were actually this is going back to like 1990s, early 90s. They were buying back some land to precisely do that. These are Mohawks who were displaced from their original land, again, upstate New York, 5 hours north of here. But I haven't been following developments in that community in a long time. I don't know if others do. I know the other interesting issue that was happening was out here in Montauk, in Southampton with the Shinnecock. They've had ongoing struggles around what they can do on their land because of the place that they're located, probably one of the highest income communities or territories, certainly in the United States. And I know there was a big controversy about the sign. They had a big sign on 27 that was causing controversy, but it was on their territory and they thought that it was an income generator. And I know that there was a recent visit here on campus by some leaders of the Shinnecock Nation, but I'm not really familiar with some of the activism that's happening. Alex might.
Actually, I was going to say something. I was going to say something completely different because I was referencing there's a photo going around. I don't know if anybody can find it and pull it up and maybe share their screen of what Manhattan would look like if New York City was if it was still like original land, And I believe it was National Geographic that like published the issue. Either it's a resurfaced it's either a resurfaced image or it was just done. But it's like the cover of National Geographic, and like half of the graphic is New York City as we know it today, and half of the graphic is what Manhattan would look like today if there was still Indigenous people living on that land and we hadn't interfered. And I just think that is a really interesting image to be floating around right now. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I don't know if anybody wants to pull it up.
Let's pull it up on my iPhone. I don't know if you can see. That's Manhattan, supposedly. Yeah. So I mean, I think the issue of what's done here on campus, student organizing. I mean, obviously this the green organizing. There's organizations on campus, I suppose, that are doing environmental work. I wonder what CCE is doing in collaboration with some of those, and community organizations as well that are doing sustainable, sustainable projects in the community.
Well, as a matter of fact, at 1 o'clock, there is a talk about native plants, Long Island native plants in Breslin 216. And after that, there is a planting of a native garden over by Stuyvesant Hall that anyone interested in can jump in and help with. That's at 2:40. And then after that, there is a talk about wildlife conservation on Long Island. So if people are interested in learning about those topics, helping out, pitching it at 2:40, you're more than welcome as part of the Earth Day events that we're hosting today. But my understanding is that the university is not committed. I don't know that they're opposed either, but they've not committed to converting what they've planted here to natives, because it is an arboretum. They're going to have trees from all over, not just local Long Island trees. I don't know more than that. I have a question, and I don't know who, if anyone has an answer to it, but I wanted to ask this of Winona LaDuke, but I wanted students to have their questions answered. If hemp is a valuable fiber, why isn't everyone using it? Or is the byproduct of petroleum just so plentiful that you can just keep spinning artificial fabrics out of it for cheaper than growing a plant?
Yeah, I wanted to ask her some questions about hemp as well, in terms of the kind of territory land that needs to be used for that cultivation. I understand it's pretty resilient, a resilient weed, right? And that it could grow in many different locations. So I would have loved to have, and I guess that's some kind of research that one could do, is to find out more about hemp, because it is exploding. It's going everywhere. You see stores, that are now marketing the products, and yeah, that could be a good alternative. I was not aware, for example, of hemp as a source for batteries. I just learned that from Winona today. I was not aware of that at all. The insulation I did. I thought I was actually thinking about using it for my house upstate, but yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff there to find out more about that.
Alex, you do have some questions.
Yeah, there's actually a question in the chat, Sarah. She says, LaDuke mentioned that the people who cause the problem are the ones who need to do the work to minimize it. We're all members of the population that has been causing these climate-related issues, and we're all in positions of privilege to be able to be here having this discussion. However, we know that conversations like these are often left at the door, and people are often able to just return to their own lives without giving a second thought. So how do we convince people in positions of power and privilege to continue this fight, to uplift Indigenous populations who are most directly affected by climate challenges?
I mean, I think it's a matter of no compromise, really. I'm blown away. First of all, horrified, and she rightfully pointed out the war. She mentioned the war, and I'm horrified by what's happening in the war. And the results of when we don't even see coming is what I continue to insist in my class and other spaces. We don't even see what's going to happen. We're seeing the horrific images from Ukraine now, but we have no idea what's going to happen in the foreseeable future as a result of this. But the immediate response here has been a really asinine political response, looking at the next round of elections as opposed to long-term growth and long-term development and what we're going to do. And so Biden green lights the exploration and the licenses for more extraction in a number of different protected territories around the country. And I wanted to ask her what she felt about Deb Haaland and the role that she's been playing as Secretary of the Interior. The first time an Indigenous woman has been in that position. One would have thought that there would have been some pushback. And that as long as that happens and you have Democrats and independents that are just kind of accepting that, and Republicans denouncing it no matter what they do, and people just sit by the sidelines, it's just going to happen again and again and again. It goes back to the cynicism that so many people feel right now. I think without apology, people have to be denouncing that and finding ways to make sure that those kind of things, that they don't get reelected and that they don't continue with that kind of really simple-minded policy making that ultimately is going to destroy the planet. It's already destroying the planet. So I don't know. I'm not sure how people feel about that, but I think people have to really be angry about those kinds of decisions that are being made. I'm surprised that I mean the environmental groups have been speaking out. We've been hearing about it, but it's almost like because it's Biden, it's okay,
I have another question for you, Professor Murillo, before we have to go. Do you think that there's anything like Hofstra students can do, like at the university level, to help with the climate movement? I know you mentioned the campaign to boycott Coca-Cola. Do you think that there's anything else that's going on right now, maybe with like the new club Leaf or with any other environmental clubs on campus?
I have to be made familiar with. I wasn't even aware of the organization. I mean, and this is part of the struggle, maintaining spaces of communication, right? Because how many people still on campus don't know CCE exists and the great work that you guys are doing. A lot of people who don't know, and they might be doing things on a parallel path of some of the organizing that you guys are doing at CCE, but there's not synchronization and connection, building bridges with other groups, and not only, which you guys know this because this is your mandate, not only on the campus but locally, right, in the community, and that's why I always appreciated what CCE tries to do. Students should get involved in those those actions, because there's a lot of work being done around environmental issues on Long Island, on the water, around air quality, replanting trees. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on throughout the island around environmental issues. So I think students should be involved and get connected with them. But I wasn't aware of some. I'm not totally aware of all the groups that are happening, that are based here on campus, that are doing that kind of work.
Can I just jump in? I would suggest regarding the student organizations, the various student organizations and clubs, because CCE is unto itself, and probably some of the fellows that are involved with CCE are not necessarily involved with some of the student clubs, that you reach out to the Office of Student Leadership. They can provide you with a list of all the student clubs and what their mandates are, what their missions are, and if it aligns with some of the things that you're doing. I would also suggest that you contact Anita Ellis, who does a lot of work with the community. I mean, she even organizes the shake and rake and the plantings for the homes in the local community within the 5-mile radius. But she also has connections with some of the civic organizations and stuff like that. So you can probably get information from her as well. Okay.
Thank you so much. I absolutely love Anita Ellis, actually. She's my advisor for one of my clubs. She's
Right.
absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. I don't know if CCE still does it, but we used to, a lot of our students, fellows used to work on that project in the community here, and they would plant like.
Mm-hmm. And they still do. I mean, she's probably getting ready to get those dates together for the spring. So so definitely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you again. Unfortunately, we are running low on time. So I do want to just urge everybody to not only just reflect on what you heard here today, but if you can, please go to Hofstra CCE's website at hofstra.edu/CCE for you to continue the conversation. We have a blog, a podcast, and all sorts of resources where you can not only learn more about these issues, but attend events about these issues. We have one later today at 1 p.m. entitled Unfolding the Possibilities of Sustainable Fashion. It will be in the Cultural Center Theater across the hall from the library. So I highly recommend you attend, and I cannot express how important CCE is to this campus and activities and involvement here. If you want to learn more about becoming a CCE fellow like myself, where you can lead events like this, where you host Indigenous leaders virtually, please go to hofstra.edu/CCE and look up our fellow applications for next semester.
Excellent.
Thank you all.
Good one.
Have a good afternoon, everybody. And I hope to see you all at different events tonight. Take care.